What if I told you that the very moment a gentle empath finally says, enough, is the exact moment a narcissist's worst nightmare begins? Carl Jung discovered something that would terrify every manipulator, every gaslighter, and every narcissist. He realized that a fed-up empath, the one who has silently endured for years, doesn't just break, they transform. And what they become is far more dangerous than any narcissist ever imagined. You see, most people think empaths are fragile, too soft, too sensitive. But Jung saw something no one else did. He noticed that when empaths reach their breaking point, they don't collapse. They don't become cruel or cold. Instead, they become unbreakable. Jung's clinical observations led him to a remarkable conclusion: when empaths, those gentle, giving souls, are pushed to their breaking point, they don't shatter. Instead, they undergo an alchemical transformation. Years of absorbed emotional poison. The repressed anger, grief, and manipulation they've carried for others, suddenly transmutes into a potent psychological gold. This process, which Jung called the transcendent function, is the ability to transform opposite forces, such as passive absorption and active self-protection, into something entirely new. An empath stops being a passive vessel for other people's darkness and becomes a fierce, active force of light. This isn't a gentle awakening, it's a profound, sometimes explosive, shift that Jung called enantiodromia, the principle that everything eventually turns into its opposite. The endless giver becomes the conscious chooser. The perpetual absorber becomes the strategic reflector. The empath's journey, from wounded healer to sovereign healer. Jung's perspective on archetypes sheds light on this journey. The empath often embodies the wounded healer, an archetype that gains wisdom through suffering. However, Jung observed that when this archetype reaches its limit, it transforms. It evolves into what can be called the sovereign healer, someone who heals from a position of strength and wisdom rather than self-sacrifice. This transformation happens in 3 key stages. Stage 1, the recognition. The empath's journey begins with a moment of recognition, a lifting of the veil. They suddenly see the pattern, the times they've absorbed blame that wasn't theirs, the moments they've apologized for others' bad behavior, and the years they've believed love meant endless giving while receiving crumbs. This is the moment when unconscious patterns become conscious. Stage 2, the integration. After recognizing the pattern, the empath doesn't reject their sensitivity, they weaponize it. Their hyperperceptive abilities are no longer used to absorb and please. Instead, they become psychological seers, using their intuition to see through manipulation with surgical precision. This requires integrating their shadow, the suppressed parts of themselves, like anger, boundaries, and self-protection, that they've been taught to deny. Jung understood that the shadow isn't evil, it's simply unlived life waiting for expression. Stage 3, the sovereignty. The final stage is individuation, a Jungian concept for becoming a psychologically whole and self-directed person. The empath stops seeking external validation and becomes self-sufficient. They no longer need others to complete them because they've completed themselves through this profound inner work. This creates a paradox: the more an empath integrates their shadow, the more compassionate they become. But their compassion is no longer naive, it is fierce, discerning, and absolutely terrifying to those who rely on their dysfunction. The narcissist's worst fear, an empath's immunity. A fed-up empath doesn't fight back with the same weapons. They transcend the entire battlefield. Here's why this is so terrifying for a narcissist. They become immune to manipulation. The awakened empath learns to see through the narcissist's masks and read their unconscious motivations. They can detect lies and emotional performances, becoming what can be called a truth detector. They stop participating in the dynamic. Jung's principle of psychological nonviolence is key here. The empath doesn't need to fight, they simply withdraw their participation. Without the empath's emotional labor and unconscious cooperation, the manipulative system collapses. They expose the system. By withdrawing their energy, the empath reveals how much of what passes for normal relationships is actually based on a dysfunctional pattern of psychological vampirism. They become unconsciousness disruptors, people whose mere presence challenges others to examine their own patterns. When an empath awakens, they realize they weren't randomly targeted. They were chosen precisely because they possessed the very thing the narcissist lacked, the capacity for genuine feeling, authentic connection, and real empathy. But now, instead of giving these gifts away unconsciously, they learn to share them selectively with those who can reciprocate. They stop being drawn to broken people who need fixing and start being attracted to whole people who want to grow together. The RSE method, a Jungian framework for empathic sovereignty. Jung's principles of individuation and shadow integration provide a powerful, four-step framework for empaths to reclaim their power. R. Recognize the pattern. Making the unconscious conscious is the first step. You must see how you have been participating in your own emotional depletion. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." This is not about blame, it's about empowerment. I. Integrate the shadow. This means reclaiming all the qualities you've been taught to suppress: anger, selfishness, and the capacity to say no without explanation. Your anger might be righteous indignation in need of expression. Your selfishness might be healthy self-care that's long overdue. Integrating these parts is essential for psychological wholeness. S. Stop the energy leak. Jung recognized that our psyche has a limited amount of energy, which he called psychic energy. When we constantly pour this energy into others without replenishment, we become depleted. For empaths, this is an existential crisis. Your deep well of empathy becomes a liability when you're unconsciously acting as an emotional sponge for others. To stop the energy leak, you must become a conscious manager of your emotional resources, practicing what Jung might call psychological economy. This involves systematically identifying the sources of your depletion and plugging the leaks. For many empaths, these leaks are relationships or situations where your generosity is seen as a bottomless resource to be exploited rather than a gift to be cherished. The power of no. The simplest way to plug an energy leak is to say no. It's a complete sentence that needs no justification. Empaths are often taught that setting boundaries is selfish. However, from a Jungian perspective, a boundary is a necessary part of individuation. It's an act of self-love that protects your psychological well-being. By saying no to a request that drains you, you're not rejecting the other person, you're honoring your own needs. The cost of justification: empaths often feel a need to over-explain their choices, believing that if they can just make the other person understand, the conflict will be resolved. This is a profound energy leak. The person who is committed to misunderstanding you will use your explanations as more material for manipulation. Your words become ammunition. By stopping this cycle of justification, you conserve your precious energy and refuse to participate in the drama. E. Embody authentic power. The ultimate aim of Jungian psychology is individuation, the process of becoming your whole, authentic self. For an empath, this means integrating all parts of yourself, the shadow, the wounded healer, and the sovereign, into a cohesive whole. Authentic power isn't about controlling others or dominating a situation. It's about a deep, unshakable sovereignty over yourself. You become the master of your own internal kingdom. This self-mastery is an existential threat to manipulators. A narcissist thrives on controlling another person's emotional state, thoughts, and actions. When you become self-directed rather than other-directed, you become unpredictable. Your responses are no longer conditioned by their needs, they are born from your own internal truth. Love with boundaries: this is the highest expression of empathic power. It's the ability to love without losing yourself, to give without depleting yourself, and to care without sacrificing your well-being. This requires both a soft heart and a strong spine. The sovereign empath's heart is not closed, it is discerning. They understand that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. The sovereign heart, choosing who receives your energy. The empath's journey to sovereignty culminates in a profound act of self-love and discernment. It's the moment they realize their open heart is not a public park, but a sacred garden. They no longer allow just anyone to wander in and trample their emotional landscape. Instead, they selectively open their hearts to those who have also committed to their own inner work. These are individuals who can reciprocate with respect, authenticity, and a willingness to share, not just take. This isn't about becoming cold or closed off, it's about shifting from naive openness to conscious compassion. You can still feel deeply, but you do so from a place of strength, not vulnerability. This new way of being is a powerful magnet, attracting emotionally mature individuals who recognize and value your depth. It's an internal screening process that filters out those who would exploit your gifts, replacing them with relationships that nourish your soul. This discerning love is a reflection of your integrated self, the part of you that holds both fierce boundaries and boundless empathy in perfect balance. Creating a new reality, the empathic revolution. The ultimate power of the fed-up empath lies not in direct action against their former abusers, but in the creation of a new reality for themselves. This is a subtle yet revolutionary act. By embodying authentic power, you become a living testament to the fact that it is possible to break free from cycles of manipulation and codependency. Your life becomes a work of art, painted with conscious choices, genuine peace, and relationships built on mutual respect rather than unconscious need. This shift is far more threatening to a narcissist than any confrontation could ever be. Confronting a manipulator on their terms only gives them more energy to feed on. However, when you simply walk away and thrive, you deny them their source of supply and prove that their methods are powerless against a sovereign soul. Your life becomes a mirror, reflecting their own inner emptiness and lack of authentic connection, a sight they find unbearable. This personal transformation ignites a larger empathic revolution. When one empath awakens and reclaims their power, they create a permission wave that inspires others to do the same. You become a beacon of truth and a model of psychological sovereignty. You show the world that vulnerability and strength are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. This quiet revolution exposes the darkness of unconscious manipulation and plants the seeds for healthier, more conscious human relationships. Are you ready to stop being dangerous to yourself and start being a catalyst for a more conscious world?